Hello, everyone. Hi. Thank you all for being here this evening. My name is Ida Cutler. I'm a bookseller at Women and Children First, one of the last remaining feminist bookstores in the United States, located in Chicago, Illinois. Thank you so much again for being here on this summer evening to celebrate the release of Nightbitch. Here it is. Yay! Yay! Before every event, we acknowledge that the land that Women and Children First is situated on is the land of several tribal nations, the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, Odawa, the Sac, Fox, Miamia, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee. We recognize these nations as the traditional occupants of the land and its importance for the 65,000 indigenous peoples living here today. Furthermore, it is in Women and Children First mission to use books as tools for liberation and amplify unrepresented voices. With this land acknowledgement, we recognize the importance of providing books that include information on the ongoing legacies of indigenous peoples as well as their dispossession and the white settler colonialism that our store has benefited from. On to tonight's event. Tonight it is my honor to be hosting Rachel Yoder and Hilary Leichter. Rachel Yoder is a founding editor of Draft, the Journal of Process. She holds MFAs from the University of Arizona and the University of Iowa, where she was an Iowa Arts Fellow. Her stories and essays have been published in literary journals such as the Kenyon Review and the Missouri Review, as well as national outlets such as the New York Times, The Sun, and Lit Hub. Hilary Leichter is author of the novel Temporary. Hilary is the we just edited this right before, so I wrote two sentences twice. Temporary was shortlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, longlisted for the Penn Hemingway Award, and a finalist for the NYPL Young Lions Fiction Award. Her writing has appeared in N+1, The New Yorker, Harper's, The New York Times, and Conjunctions. She teaches fiction at Columbia University. Both of these amazing writers have written some of the most bonkers books, and by I say that like that's my favorite adjective to describe something. I cannot wait for this conversation. Before we begin, for everyone tuning in, I just want to say if you have yet to order Rachel or Hilary's book, you can do so at any time at womenandchildrenfirst.com, or you can click that teal button that says buy book here. If you already have Nightbitch or you already have Temporary, somebody else needs it, so click that button. And the store is currently offering both in-person shopping, and we also have shipping. We also have curbside pickup. We make it so easy for you to get a book in whatever way you want in these times. During the event, be sure to drop a question for Rachel using the Ask a Question feature. That is that button right under there, right under the teal button, and we will get to the Q&A at the end of the reading and the conversation. And I say this every time, don't be shy, ask a question. Usually midway through, I have to type in the chat, like, ask your questions, everybody. We want them. So maybe tonight's the night I don't even have to prompt. We'll find out. It's going to be great. I'm so excited. Thank you all so much. One more, round of applause from wherever you're sitting. And I'll see you at the end of the event.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Hilary. How's it going?
Good. How are you? How are you feeling?
I am doing well. I'm a little bit tired. I traveled to New York yesterday, but really excited to be here and be doing this, and excited to meet and talk with you, someone whose book I have admired so much. So.
Well, I feel the same way. I'm so excited to be here with you the week of your book launch to celebrate Nightbitch. Do you think we could start off with you reading a little bit from the book?
Sure. I was gonna read just from the very beginning, so I don't need to set anything up. And probably if you're watching this event, you have some familiarity with the premise of the book. And if you don't, this is how it begins. So I'll just read for a little bit. Here we go. When she had referred to herself as Nightbitch, she meant it as a good-natured, self-deprecating joke, because that's the sort of lady she was, a good sport, able to poke fun at herself, definitely not uptight, not wound really tight, not so freakishly tight that she couldn't see the humor in a lighthearted, not meant as an insult situation. But in the days following this new naming, she found a patch of coarse black hair sprouting from the base of her neck and was like, what the fuck? I think I'm turning into a dog, she said to her husband when he arrived home after a week away for work. He laughed and she didn't. She had hoped he wouldn't laugh. She had hoped that week as she lay in bed wondering if she was turning into a dog, that when she said those words to her husband, he would tip his head to one side and ask for clarification. She had hoped he would take her concerns seriously, but as soon as she said the words, she saw this was impossible. Seriously, she insisted, I have this weird hair on my neck. She lifted her normal hair to show him the black patch. He rubbed it with his fingers and said, yeah, you're definitely a dog. To her credit, she did appear more hirsute than usual. Her unruly hair moved about her head and shoulders like a cloud of wasps. Her brows caterpillared across her forehead with unplucked growth. She had even witnessed 2 black hairs curling from her chin, and in the right light, in any light at all, to be honest, you could see the 5 o'clock shadow of her mustache as it grew back in after her last laser treatment. Had she always had so much hair on her arms, descending the edge of her jaw from her hairline? Was it normal to have patches of hair on the tops of your feet? And look at my teeth, she said, baring her teeth and pointing to her canines. She was convinced they had grown, and the tips had narrowed to ferocious points that could cut a finger with a mere prick. Why, she had nearly cut hers during her nightly examination in the bathroom. Every night when her husband was gone and their son was happily playing with trains in his pajamas, she stood at the mirror and pulled her lips back from her teeth, turned her head from side to side, then tilted her head back and looked at her teeth from that bottom-up angle, searched the internet on her phone for pictures of canines to which she might compare her own, tapped her teeth with her fingernails, told herself she was being silly, then searched humans with dog teeth on her phone, searched do humans and dogs share a common ancestor, searched human-animal hybrid and recessive animal genes in humans, and research human-animal genes legacy, searched werewolves, searched real werewolves in history, searched somewhat inexplicably witches, searched somewhat relatedly hysteria, 19th century, and then, since she wanted to, searched rest cures and the yellow wallpaper, and she reread the yellow wallpaper, which she had once read in college, then stared blankly for a while at nothing in particular while sitting on the toilet, then stopped searching altogether. Touch it, she insisted, pointing to her tooth. Her husband reached out and prodded the tip of her canine with his pointer finger. Ow, he said, pulling his hand back and cradling it close to his body. Just kidding, he said as he held up an unscathed finger and waggled it at her face. Your tooth looks the same to me. You always think something's wrong with you, he said pleasantly. Her husband was an engineer. He specialized in quality control. What precisely this meant, the mother was not entirely sure. So we went around and looked at machines to make sure they were maximizing efficiency, adjusted systems to keep them humming along at higher frequencies, read output reports, and made suggestions toward improvement. Sure, whatever. What she did know was that he had little time for feelings, a condescending patience for intuition, and scoffed openly at talk unsupported by peer-reviewed scientific studies or statistics. Still, he was a good man, a caring man, an affable man, whom she appreciated very much despite everything. She was, after all, prone to indecision, doubling back on things she had once felt but had since come to feel differently about. She was prone to anxiety, to worry, to a sensation in her chest that her heart might explode. She ran hot. She buzzed. She either needed to keep busy or else she needed to lie down and sleep. Her husband, on the other hand, needed nothing whatsoever. No wonder then that they deferred to his judgment, his good, level-headed judgment, his engineer's evenness. Of course there was nothing wrong with her. This she told herself as they lay in bed, their child between them, asleep and wedging his toes beneath her leg. I think I should sleep in the guest room, she whispered to her husband. Why? He whispered back. I get so angry now. At night, she said. He didn't respond. I think I just need a good night's sleep, she added. Okay, he said. She rolled from bed without a sound and felt her way down the stairs and tucked into the clean sheets of the guest bed. She rubbed the patch of coarse hair on the back of her neck to soothe herself, then ran her tongue over the sharp edges of her teeth. In this way, she fell into a thick and unbothered sleep. And that's how we launch into the story of a mother who becomes convinced she's turning into a dog and has, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stressors, a lot of stuff to work through, and does so hopefully through the course of this book.
Thank you. That's such a fantastic opening. Thank you for reading that. I love the way that the book starts with all of these things that women are sort of instructed to trim or scrape away, like hair and like sharp teeth, and it's almost like this kind of unnatural growth, but like natural growth that's happening, and she's sort of WebMDing the crap out of it and trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Is that always where the book started, or could you talk a little bit about how this all began?
Yeah. So I never had any intention to write a novel. I just always assumed I'd be like a short story writer. I love short stories, and that's kind of like what I know how to write. So when I began this, I thought I was writing a short story collection. So I was sort of thinking of it in terms of like a number of short stories, all sort of similar to what Nightbitch is doing thematically, like looking at the same things. Meanwhile, I also know how to write essays. So I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to write short stories, and then I'll also write some essays about motherhood. So I had started trying to write essays too, which weren't really going anywhere. And then I had all these kind of like bits and pieces laying around. And I saw that, maybe they all go in the same project, and maybe what I'm working on is something much larger. So actually the very first part of the book that I wrote was not the beginning, and I didn't think it was part of a book. I thought it was part of an essay, and it was the part about breastfeeding, about, a working mom trying to to go to the lactation room. I thought I was going to write an essay called Lactation Room. So there's this whole kind of screed rant in the book about a mom who's working in the lactation room, and just sort of like the weirdness of that is like a cultural thing that, this like something that's in our culture. And I started to see, like, once I started kind of writing what is now the novel, that, all of these things I had been thinking about in motherhood can like fit into what I was doing with this story. And that there was room for a sort of essayistic ranting, at least in the beginning, within a novel, which really like opened up the novel form for me. And made it like a really interesting sort of artistic endeavor to be like, I can kind of do these essayistic things while also working in a narrative mode.
That's so fascinating, because I feel like it never feels essayistic. It feels all of those moments of intellectual exuberance feel fueled by anger or rage, which is something that the character says in the very first pages of the book. Is that something that fueled your writing, or does fuel your writing? Anger?
Yes. Typically before this, no, I don't think I really wrote out of anger. I mean, I wrote out of maybe, confusion more than, like trying to figure it out. So, I mean, I do think my writing has always been, in a sense, a sort of, a very personal and a somewhat psychological endeavor, even if what I'm writing is not, like the facts of it are not based on my life. I feel like I'm still kind of trying to figure things out through my writing, and maybe all writers do that, but that's definitely like what my approach is.
So wait, you're saying that you don't turn into a dog every night?
I know, it's hard to believe.
Just checking, because it felt so real. I assume it must be true, because that's what we assume.
I know. But you're just gonna have to believe me on this one, that is a made up detail of it. Yeah. So, but yes, this was the rage as an engine that sort of animated the voice of the book. And that once I got that sort of voice and energy, I saw it was something that I could work with and that could like move me through a really big project, which I'd never like tried really to write a novel before. So I was like, how am I going to keep working on the same project for like 250 pages? Yeah. And I was angry enough, I think, that I was like, oh, this will serve me well to get through the book. Yeah.
It totally works. And it's funny because I think the anger fuels unexpected things in the book too. Like obviously there's some violence in there where, you know, we're talking about a woman who is getting in touch with kind of her feral animalistic side. And so there are these violent moments where you can feel the anger really at the surface of the prose, but also it's really funny. And the funny moments felt angry too, you know, and even like just the kind of fierce love that you see between the mother who doesn't have a name. None of the characters have the main family unit. None of them have names. And her son, even that has like a kind of like ferocious rage to it. And it's just fascinating. I think as an engine, I feel like we don't necessarily talk about anger enough as a viable emotion to fuel a writing project, but you can just like feel it simmering here.
Yeah, it feels like, I mean, maybe we should talk about it. Maybe people should think about it more as an engine, because it also has this nice, I mean, then there's also something to resolve. Like there's an inherent tension that you're sort of working through and can work through via, not just like via the plot, but via tone, right? And that was something I was thinking about too. Like, how is the tone of the book going to change as I move through it? And how can it also kind of be resolved in terms of tone? And I think it does go from this sort of snarky, angry voice. And then at the end, it's perhaps a little bit closer to like the voice of Wanda White, who's a character we meet, this like sort of cronish voice or a voice of wisdom. That was my intent. So hopefully it does that.
No, absolutely. I think, like, I was thinking just as you were talking about this idea of resolution and mystery, and I think that in a lesser book that's not as brilliant as yours, the central mystery would kind of be, well, is she actually turning into a dog? Which is something that Nightbitch refuses to answer for us. It's purposely ambiguous and in a really delicious way, and we don't know. And I think that's not the central question of the book. So what is, like, what was the central idea that you were writing toward? I mean, I think it's always the thing that a reader is reading toward and the thing that a writer is writing toward are maybe not always the same thing. And so if not deciding whether or not she was actually going through this transformation every night, really, what was the question you were trying to answer in writing that?
Yeah. I mean, if anything, I was trying to definitely not answer that question. I did not want that to be answered. I mean, to me, the sort of problem of modern motherhood, the conundrum that so many women find themselves in regards to wanting a career, having like an ambition for yourself, but then also having, an ambition for your family, like wanting to have a family and having this very like hardwired, like biological urge to have children. And then add to that the sort of, financial logistics, like childcare logistics, like
Yeah.
all of this whole like stew of modern motherhood felt unsolvable to me. Like it felt like there is no solution. I don't know how women make this work. Like I don't know how to resolve it. And that was, I really needed in my like own life, in my personal life, to find an answer. I was searching and I was sort of desperate. And I felt very stuck. And so that was sort of the driving question for me. Like, can Nightbitch get to a place somehow where that feels good? That feels like, it might not be perfect, right? I don't think there's like everything's going to be solved, but just a place that's not this place of like rage and isolation. Can she move to another place? And what would that place look like? And how would she get there? Right. And that, I mean, it seemed like you couldn't, to me, I couldn't get there without like some magic, you know, like without like a magical transformation, without a like mysterious crone figure who you never see, without her sort of weird art. Like I didn't know how to get there. So that was what compelled me. I wanted to find out what she, like, it really did feel like Nightbitch had like something to show me. And I was interested in what that was.
There's, yeah, no, I think that's, I love what you said about not being able to get there without the magic in the book. And I think that's what makes it feel so necessary, aside from just being a really beautiful metaphor for the way that your body kind of becomes not your own anymore after you have kids, and even just every stage of being a woman, your body like flips the script on you over and over again in a way that's completely out of your control and feels diabolical and fantastical. Like it doesn't feel real, you know. There's just a lot about having a body as a woman that is magical, both in its like most extreme werewolf ways and its extreme beauty too.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting that the mystery goes unsolved, because I think it says something so beautiful about the loneliness of motherhood. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, if that was something that you were thinking about writing this book, because the only reason we don't know whether or not Nightbitch is real is because she has no witnesses. There's like no one there, and even her husband can't quite see it. You know, he can't quite be a part of it. And I love the way you write that character, because he's not the villain. He's just like a part of the problem, you know. And he's complex and interesting too.
Yeah.
But this idea of like having to create and nurture and make art, but also make a person without anyone to see it. Does it even happen? Is that kind of like, was that on your mind writing this?
Yeah, what you just said was so beautiful. And I like felt it in my body. Yes. Like that was exactly what I was writing out of, the fact of that you're doing this thing and there are no witnesses. Or, I mean, that was also part of that sort of unsolvable problem for me, was how do I resolve my isolation, this like deep isolation that I'm feeling, when it just seems like I don't know where my people are. I don't know where my pack is, so to speak. And how, I mean, I think that's still like a question that's on my mind, is how to find your pack in adulthood. That's kind of like a central question of my life, because I, you know, like left my Mennonite community rather abruptly, like in my early 20s, and made this very big break. And my 20s were some of like the loneliest years of my life, like just trying to figure out like how to be a person, feeling very alone, not knowing like who my people were. And I think that question is continued over into Nightbitch. You know, talking to other mothers too, just about how isolating motherhood can be. That's just, it was definitely another thing on my mind. Like, how do we as communities solve this problem? Like, can we like start talking about it? Can we come together and figure out like how to know each other more, how to be in closer touch? And obviously that's something that's even like compounded now after the pandemic is, I find myself, and maybe you do too, like really yearning for like meaningful community and to be in like meaningful relationship with the people around me in a way that like didn't seem like as top of a priority before the pandemic. But it's just become really clear that we're animals. We need each other so desperately. So that was definitely one of like the central problems of the book, for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm alone in saying that maybe everyone got a little taste of that this year, what new parents experience in our country, and like having to go through that when the rest of the world isn't, and things are still moving forward and everything isn't at a standstill, and what that means to kind of be on the outside. I was thinking about that word in the very first sentence of your book, self-deprecating, which, someone who's self-deprecating, I think of them as someone I want to be friends with. Like it feels like a positive thing actually, but then when you break it down, it's actually this horrible act of like self-immolation and harm. And it even has the word prey in it too, like just the way it sounds. And there's something so violent about self-deprecation. And I wonder, like, these defenses that we have built up to explain the way things are and to kind of laugh off the impossibility of being human if language isn't a really big part of that. Like, do the way people talk to you about being a mother does that piss you off? Like, does the language around motherhood piss you off?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes. I mean, the language around corporate mommyhood, the language that's like, whenever language starts to turn into marketing copy, or it has this like rhythm and twang of sales, is when I like my hair to put it in animal terms, like the hair stands up on the back of my neck. Like, it's so inauthentic. Because there is this like genuine desire to like connect. There's this genuine desire to like be empowered, but then empowerment gets like co-opted by capitalism and turned into this like repulsive thing that you can buy or and it's just so counterfeit and so false, and so that was also so much like the work of this book was like, and there are a lot of like voices in this book. Like, there's stuff that's italicized. It's sort of this like running commentary, but then it brings in all these voices. And I think as a mom, that was my experience. I had all these voices, and like the voices of like expectation, what a mom should be, and like religion, and the voice of like patriarchy, like all of these things are always talking at you in your head. And it's a constant negotiation of like those voices. And I think once I started slowing it down and like interrogating, like, okay, I'm going to slow it down. Who is that talking? Like, who is that crazy voice that's telling me, like, my house isn't clean enough?
Right.
Like, who the fuck is that? And why am I still listening to it? Or like someone who's telling me like I shouldn't like let my kid have a cookie. Like, who is that talking to me? What is that voice's agenda? How does that voice serve me? Like, this has been me kind of like coming into my own power in parenthood, is like confronting all those voices. Yeah, and they all have their own like tenor that now is just like so noxious when I hear it. And I think that was part of, there's a thread in the book that has to do with multi-level marketing.
Yes.
And the mommies who all sort of buy into that, which again, like I think that culture, that scheme is so successful because people do have a genuine desire, like to be part of something. They want an answer, but like, it's not providing like counterfeit answers and counterfeit solutions, via selling herbs or whatever.
Right.
So I wanted to sort of confront that a bit in the book.
Yeah. I mean, some of the most powerful sections of the book are just Nightbitch learning how to mother her child as something other than human. And it's nonverbal, a lot of it. It's just like instinctual and like barking and panting and eating and nuzzling and like playing and getting dirty and making a mess and making sounds, but there's no like use your words, like there's none of like that kind
it's
of
like don't use your words.
It's the opposite. And that coupled with these women who are trying to ultimately have the same thing that Nightbitch has, like agency and power outside of their homes, but with all of this bullshit language, about all this marketing language. And those two things side by side are just so stunning, the difference between real power and fake power. And just listening to you talk about the voices in your head, I mean, coming into your own power as a parent sounds very much like coming into your own power as a writer and learning who to listen to and what edits make sense and what you're supposed to do in a narrative versus what you want to do, and learning to choose those things for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And that, when I was 21 and estranged from my family and my community, very much like lost and alone in the desert, in a very biblical setting. I went to the desert to be by myself. I somehow crossed paths with a very kind writing professor, writing instructor, as they are, who said, "You're really good. You should keep writing." And I just needed like one person to say something kind to me and like one word of encouragement. And I found writing to be like, on a very sort of literal level, like a way of writing myself into being. Like, I didn't know how to do the story I was doing. I didn't know how you left your home community and went out west by yourself. Like, I didn't know how to do it. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to like write some stories and use like the structure of narrative as a sort of blueprint to get these characters move a character from one place to another, and then sort of objectifying that experience, perhaps instruct myself on how to get through this time. And so that,
beautiful. That's
like, but there's, I mean, what a wonderful gift to have this like tool of writing and of story to make sense of what's going on for you. Again, it's not like I'm taking all the details from my life and putting them in every story, but it's a way to make meaning, to make sense. And so that's, again, like what I did with this book. Like, I needed to make sense of something. I did not have the words for it. Like, I could not have sat down and like talked to my husband about it. I didn't have the words. I had like inarticulate rage. And the only thing I knew to do with that was to turn to writing. And so what a gift, like what a comfort that we have this. So yeah, I was really grateful for it. After, it should also be mentioned, this was after 2 years of not writing after my son was born, and just feeling very, that was also like this huge estrangement from myself, right? Like I was like, maybe I'm not a writer anymore, which is a whole, like maybe the worst thing I could think, you know, to have happen. Like maybe I'm just, that's not who I am anymore. And so being able to return to it and like work all of that out through writing was, yeah, that's what this book was.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I think that is so powerful and maybe helpful to remember now that it seems like every year as a species, we enter these frameworks that have not existed before and these realities that are new, completely new, and we can't like reach for the field guide to magical women or for like some text as proof of what we're experiencing. It's like we have to kind of write through it or make art through it or invent through it or do something to explain it to ourselves.
Yes. I mean, to me, literature and art feel more important than they ever have. You know, like it's become really clear this past year what role we as artists play in the culture. Like it is so important for a culture to be able to like imagine something different and to dream something. I mean, it sounds hokey, like the language around it can be very hokey, but it's, and I go back to thinking about like why Obama like swept us all off our feet, you know, like he had this hope. He was able to like conjure something that we all wanted to believe in, you know, we all wanted. And I think that that's what we're doing as writers, you know, we're like imagining stories for a culture and giving people like new ways of existing. And what, like, it just feels very important, especially as we're like moving toward all these different crises. Yeah, like how can we write new and better stories?
And that's what your protagonist does. She evolves. You know, she like finds a way to evolve so she can survive.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, it's a funny story. It's an angry story. It's a violent and gory story, but it's also a hopeful story. The idea that there's something that exists inside of you that can save you. Like it's not external, it's internal, the thing that can save you. I want to go to the ask a question. There's a really good question here. Hi, Michelle. And I just want to remind everyone here that you can pop a question in this ask a question box and Rachel will answer it. She's here for you.
I am.
This is such a great question. One way Nightbitch is isolated is in her marriage. She seems so separate, almost estranged from her husband. How much is the novel about the strains of contemporary marriage in addition to contemporary motherhood, or the strains that contemporary motherhood puts on marriage?
I mean, it's a lot about that. Yeah, I mean, I think too, it's a lot about like the myth of contemporary marriage, because that was, you know, I always thought I had this image, I had a story I had told myself about marriage, and it was going to look a certain way, and it was going to feel a certain way, and it was going to be very equal, and we were going to be very evolved. But when you are raised, as my husband and I both were, you can't escape your context, right? We were both raised within very traditional, religious, patriarchal frameworks. So even if we had like intellectualized, you know, well, obviously we're going to be equal and there are still these stories that are operating on a very like fundamental level for us. And in addition to that, just the way, again, I think we've been given these myths about how everything's resolved, like, you know, like feminism is here, like we're equal, like women can do whatever men do, like, But society is still like not set up to support that. You know what I mean? Like we're still part of these like systems and contexts that are reinforcing very different stories. And that, I think that that's what Nightbitch is struggling with, right? That like her husband is not a bad guy at all. But they're both just they're both part of this dynamic. And they're part of these systems that seem like inextricable, like they can't get out of them. When your husband makes more money than you do, and it comes time to decide who stays home, you know, and then when you think about, I mean, there's a whole rant in the book about it, but you know, like when the arts are not valued as much as the sciences, and then the blah, 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 this, you know, like the fields are gendered, they tend to have this like gender thing going on. And yeah, so I mean, I think it's about all of those strange, you know, when two well-meaning people in a marriage, like what happens given your context, and how do you resolve that? And again, I think that was a question that was up for a lot of people, you know, during the pandemic, as we were sort of pushed into close quarters with our partners, whether kids or not. We all kind of have to confront the reality of what's really going on in the dynamic, as opposed to like the marketing copy that's so easy to just like say, oh no, we're like, this is really what it is. But no, like what's really going on? And you know, honestly, I think of all of the threads in the book, I wish I had like developed that one more. I do think, if I'm just going to critique my book a little bit,
which is such a healthy thing to do now that we're in the world, and
should I not do
that? And why not?
I mean, I do wish. Yeah, that was the hardest piece to write for me. Like, how does this resolve, or how does this move between the husband and wife? And because that did seem like one of the harder like narrative problems of the book.
I mean, I think the way, without spoiling anything, because I think it kind of is an emotional spoiler in a way, like I was very moved by the way that you solved it, and I think it's almost delightfully unexpected and hopeful, to go back to what you were saying before. And I had actually like constructed this whole, because he's gone for so much of the book, and there are points where she can't even really get him on the phone or get him to say much on the phone. And I had constructed this whole reality for him where he's going off and turning into like a bird every week. Did you have,
oh my gosh, yes, I want that. I want that to happen.
That's the sequel. The Jayhawk is the sequel to that. But did you have like kind of a counter narrative going on, like a sense of where he was or what he was doing with his time and quality assurance? Or
I think he was just, I mean, I guess the only thing I really thought about him is he just was sort of didn't have a clue. Like there was this woman who was having this intense, rich, complicated experience, completely independent of her husband. And I mean, that felt really sad to me, you know, like that they just had, that she didn't know how to like show herself to him really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do think what I kept coming back to, like the book is ultimately in some ways about like, the hope and promises of like self-knowledge, of like, that it is all sort of an inside job. I mean, it's very much so for Nightbitch. Like that is the way by which she sort of is transformed, is by going deep inside herself, deep in like fully inhabiting her body is the mode by which she is able to like self-actualize.
descriptions of her as a dog in the book are so powerfully gross and beautiful and fun. Did you spend a lot of time observing animals? Do you have a dog? Did you like it? It just feels very researched and particular and strange.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I did not spend any time researching. How did I get to that? I think, you know what, a lot of it was, because someone asked me this question the other day.
Oh, really?
And as I talked through it, I realized a lot of those like doggish, like the sensory, acute sensory perception, a lot of that came from being pregnant. Because when I was pregnant, I could smell everything, you know, like everything was really heightened. And I also had these like weird urges when I was pregnant. Like I did at one point want to go out and howl at the moon. Like it was very strange. Or I wanted to like, I remember there was a full moon. I wanted to go outside naked and like roll in the grass. Like I did not do it. I kind of wish I had now. Yeah. But I was like, I understand why, you know, like we used to have these rituals that like connected us to nature.
And rituals of release too, like just the ability to, I think about the way that I release now, and it's so unhealthy and it's so not connected to nature. You know, it's connected to technology. Yeah. And Nightbitch is all about, howling at the moon, running around the yard 15 times really fast and like finding a rabbit and, you know, doing
doing work. Yes. And that's something, so the past couple of years, I've been doing somatic therapy, going to a therapist who specializes in somatic work, which seemed totally like crazy at the beginning. But I'm realizing, I need to learn how to operate my body. Like that is actually, instead of like, you know, scrolling through Twitter for an hour to relax at the end of the night, like maybe I could actually like learn how to operate my body and calm it down via like breathing. Who would have thought, you know, or I'll say, you know, I said to her one day, I was having a lot of anxiety and I'm like, can you just give me some strategies? And she's like, yeah, sure. And I'm like, okay, let me get a piece of paper. So I get a piece of paper. And she's like, you could drink a glass of water. And I'm like, okay. So I like write down, drink a glass of water. She's like, you could look out the window at something very far away. I'm like, okay, let me write, you know, like these were not what I was thinking you were going to tell me, but she's just like telling me to be in my body and sense things. And that will like, and it works. And I think that is, you know, I wrote Nightbitch before, and I think as I started to go see her, but I was already I had this sense that like the answers were in my body. And I think that also came like pregnancy is so wild, having a kid's so wild. And then like after what happens to your body, no one really talks about all the weird stuff that happens. So like going through that, perimenopause is crazy. I don't know why we're not talking about that. Like there's just so many things, particularly with the female body, that are like, there's always something going on. And to just like be here in my body has been a very powerful in terms of like healing.
And your book is so in its body in a way that I think a lot of contemporary fiction fails at. I feel like it's doing something that we've forgotten how to do as writers. And obviously I'm speaking really generally, but I mean, I can't remember the last time I read a really powerful description of smell or taste. And I think your book is engaging with those kind of dormant ways of describing the world that you can't put on Twitter. You know, they're not visual. They're not, you know, loud dinging noises. It's something else. And it's something ancient. It's something kind of magic, ultimately.
Oh,
There's another question in the box here about Nightbitch, the film. Can you talk a little bit about how that came to be?
I can, and I wonder if Monica is here because I still need to. I'm having lunch with her tomorrow. I still don't know like the logistics of how it all exactly happened, but yeah, I mean, soon after Margot Schickmanter bought it for Doubleday, I think Margot's here too. Hi. I guess there's a system by which a manuscript is somehow circulated to people who make movies. This is where everything gets a little bit blurry.
I like the way you're describing it, though. It makes it sound even more like enchanting and
I don't know. If you know how it works, please jump in. But
no, I think that's right. I think that sounds good.
Yeah, all right. So Monica introduced me to a film agent who was very interested in selling the rights, who's wonderful, Dana Spector. And she's like, I got on the phone with her, and the first thing she said to me was, I now identify as Nightbitch. And I was like, I would love to work with you. This is going to be fun. Yeah, so she, people were, and this was all right after we all shut down for COVID. So all this movie stuff was happening. I guess people read it, they were interested. I talked with a number of, production companies, which was really fun. And finally, Annapurna, who eventually optioned it, they just were the right choice in the end. They also brought on Amy Adams, which you can't say no to Amy Adams. And I had a phone call with her during COVID, which was very surreal. So that all took a long time. It took about 6 months to kind of close that deal. And then everything was shut down for COVID. So everything's kind of been paused. But
no pun intended.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry.
Pause. But there has been movement. I hope that there is an announcement soon because there are some really exciting developments that hopefully mean we're closer to the movie getting made. But it's been a really amazing experience. And the thing that's most notable, I think, is that every single person I've talked to regarding the film and its production so far has been a woman, which is really, not normal for a Hollywood production. And that has felt like a real gift. And I'm so grateful, it's just women are really excited about telling the story. So that is super cool.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so excited for announcements and more to come. I think we have time for one more question. And so I'm going to leave you with a hard one, maybe. Maybe it's easy. I don't know.
Do it.
Question.
Okay.
What for you is the most surprising thing about being a mother? And what is the most surprising thing about being a writer?
Oh, the most surprising thing about being a mother was probably how natural it felt. I don't know if that's a cop out of an answer, but it feels like this is kind of what I've been waiting my whole life for. It's so, I just, on a daily basis, it's so wonderful. It's just wonderful to be a mom. This is so generic. I wish I had a better answer.
Beautiful. It's honest.
Yeah, that there is something where, there's a lot of fears, I won't know what to do. I won't know what the right thing is. But I do think for me, I've been surprised that it's so instinctual. There's so much of it is if I stay close to my instinct, if I am in touch with myself, and listening to myself, it's a really wonderful experience. The most surprising thing about being a writer, I've been doing this for so long, but
well, maybe having your first book out is the better question.
What has been surprising? I am surprised at how, I was looking as a writer who is not yet published. You're like, oh, it's going to be so fun when the book comes out. I'm doing all this publicity and talking with people, and it is fun. But I'm also understanding that there is a reason I like to be alone with myself and my thoughts in my imaginative world. Like, that is where I feel really comfortable. And this is a whole different skill set, which is still wonderful, but it's been surprising to be like, oh, like maybe I'm sort of an introvert. Maybe I'm sort of.
I have to tell you, I had the same response, just feeling like, oh, the writing is the fun part.
Yeah. Yeah, which is not to say I'm so appreciative to have the opportunity to do this, but it really, it's like, oh, I do this because I love writing. That's.
Well, what a great way to do things. We're all going to go howl at the moon tonight, I think.
Yeah, so good. So good. Thank you so much for coming, and this conversation was so enlightening and smart, and it just was a joy to listen to. And everybody, thank you for tuning in. Please buy the book if you haven't. And buy Hilary's book if you haven't. Buy it if you have.
And I just want to say, I feel like our books are sisters in a certain, as I was reading Hilary's book, I'm like, oh, this is my jam. Like, if you like Hilary's book, I feel like you'll probably like Nightbitch. If you like Nightbitch, I feel like you'll like Hilary's book. So
it's a prequel to Nightbitch, actually. This is her early years, and then Nightbitch's motherhood, and we'll bring someone on. Yeah,
I love that. All right. Well, thank you all so much, and I hope that you have an amazing rest of your evening.
Thanks so much.
Everyone who's watching. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.